Proverbs Chapter 21 through the Bible. Part 3. It is better to dwell in a corner of the housetop than with a brawling woman in a wide house. Proverbs 21 verse 9. This is the man who did not know what true happiness was until he got married, and then it was too late. Down in Nashville, the retired pastor of a church and myself would repeatedly go down to the jail to get out a man who was a member of the church. He would be arrested over and over again for drunkenness. One time the retired preacher said something to me that I shall never forget. If I were married to the woman that he is married to, I would drink also. Of course, it is just as bad for a woman to be married to the wrong husband. My wife and I mentioned just the other night that we felt very sorry for a certain woman because she is married to a man like that. We have examples of this in the scriptures. Job didn't do so well with a wife. David was married to a daughter of Saul. I don't think there was any fellowship or any real love in that marriage. She ridiculed David when he so joyously brought the ark to Jerusalem. She told him he made a fool of himself, dancing before the ark. She called his behavior disgraceful. Believe me, if you show some enthusiasm for God, there will be a great many people who will be embarrassed. It is tragic if it is your mate who is embarrassed. When the scorner is punished, the simple is made wise, and when the wise is instructed, he receiveth knowledge. Proverbs 21 verse 11. We need to note these things so that we learn lessons from the experience of others around us. Whoso stoppeth his ears at the cry of the poor, he also shall cry himself, but shall not be heard. Proverbs 21 verse 13. This is what God has said. Either it is true or it is not true. I believe it is true, and I think we can find illustrations of this in public life in our day. A gift in secret pacifieth anger, and a reward in the bosom strong wrath. Proverbs 21 verse 14. Remember that when Jacob was returning home after his years in Haran, he knew he had to face Esau for the first time after he had tricked him out of his birthright and his blessing. So he sent gifts ahead in order to pacify Esau. He didn't need to do that because God had already taken care of Esau's attitude. But men have found that a gift in secret will pacify anger. We can easily fall into this type of thinking. I'm going to be generous because then I'll be rewarded. Or I'm going to forgive someone because if I do that, it will make me feel better. James Rashawn wrote a little rhyme which illustrates this type of thinking. If I forgive an injury because resenting would poison me, I may feel noble. I may feel splendid, but it isn't exactly what Christ intended. No, it isn't what Christ intended. We are to forgive because God, for Christ's sake, has forgiven us. That is the reason we are to be kind and tender-hearted and forgiving. Our motive for forgiving is not to make us feel better. It is joy to the just to do judgment, but destruction shall be to the workers of iniquity. The man that wandereth out of the way of understanding shall remain in the congregation of the dead. Proverbs 21 verses 15 and 16. It is my understanding that God is saying here that you cannot rehabilitate criminals. They need to be regenerated. These fellows need the Word of God. We need to go into crime-ridden areas and preach the Word of God. We are going about things from the wrong direction according to God. He that loveth pleasure shall be a poor man. He that loveth wine and oil shall not be rich. Proverbs 21 verse 17. In our contemporary society, the entertainer has been glorified, and as a result, the great moral principles of life have been turned upside down. At one time, even in the court of a king, a jester, an entertainer, was called a fool. I don't think that has been changed in God's sight. However, by our popular standards, the entertainers are the sacred cows. We hear them on talk shows glorifying themselves and each other. God still says, "He that loveth pleasure shall be a poor man. He that loveth wine and oil shall not be rich." I can think of several entertainers who have committed suicide. One man made this statement, "I am bored with life." Another said, "Life is not worth living." A comedian was dying, and his friends gathered around waiting for him to say something funny. He looked at them in stark fear and dread and said, "This is not funny. We have things turned upside down. Television is like the wilderness of Moab. There is really nothing to see. It becomes very boring. The wicked shall be a ransom for the righteous, and the transgressor for the upright." Proverbs 21, verse 18. Justice demands the punishment of the guilty in order that the guiltless may be delivered. But by the grace of God, Jesus Christ, the righteous, became a ransom for the wicked. He is the upright, and you and I are the transgressors. A wise man scaleth the city of the mighty, and casteth down the strength of the confidence thereof. Proverbs 21, verse 22. He is saying that wisdom is superior to brute force. A man may be able to build a seemingly impregnable fortress, but there will come along a man who is smart enough to figure out how to invade it. The ancient city of Babylon is a classic example. Belshazzar sat inside the walls of Babylon thinking he was perfectly safe. In fact, there was an inner wall around his palace. He was certain the walls of Babylon could never be penetrated, and of course, guards were stationed all along the walls. But the general in the camp of the enemy used his wisdom and figured a way to get into Babylon. A branch of the Euphrates River went through the city, more or less like a canal. He diverted the water back into the mainstream of the river. Then he was able to march his army on the riverbed under the wall where the river had flowed. The Medo-Persian army spread into the city, and the city was taken before the Babylonians knew what was happening. Napoleon made the statement that God is always on the side of the bigger battalions. He was wrong. He should have won at Waterloo. He was a very brilliant general, but he was not quite smart enough. He had the ability to move artillery speedily, but he got bogged down in the mud. It was old General Mud that really stopped Napoleon as he went toward Warsaw. The cavalry stumbled over the artillery that was stuck in the mud. This proverb is saying that men may depend upon riches or upon brute force, but neither will be a good enough protection.